Now
What's up, everybody?
Now you got me feeling subconscious about it.
Yes, we have Barclay Dale here in the middle with newly launched Apollo Performance Analytics, which is the main reason we're doing this. And Patrick is blessing the show today in his Friar Tuck apparel, also known as if that's Hustle, right?
Yep.
Craig gave you that. It's a super comfortable and nice sweatshirt.
Yeah, when I was at God, where was I? In Birmingham, Fit Fest. Craig,
I hope we weren't expecting us to know the answer to that.
I know. Craig and Jazz, they had a booth there, and it was cool. Obviously, me and Craig go back. I actually met him in China back in 2019, and was a big fan of his. But I've developed a really cool relationship with him since then. And yeah, he'll be at Miami. But yeah, they gave me this, and they said I'm going to love it, and I do love it. It's really comfortable. And again, I'm not sponsored by Hustle, but they put out some really quality stuff, and they'll be at Wadapalooza. Speaking of which, that's where all of us will be in like less than about a week. So
that is true, and it actually is a perfect kind of opportunity to lead into what the main focus we want to talk about today is, because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about with Barclay today are things that he's been working on since the launch of the James Bond movie Moonraker back in the, well, Jake, you'll have to tell us when that one was launched. None of us were alive yet. And anyway, sorry about that. I thought that was a good comment. Jaws, that's an intimidating figure, Barclay.
I'm looking at him now.
Just I don't think you have the same smile, maybe?
I'm 7'2". Yeah, I'm 7'2". Yeah.
He was really good in Happy Gilmore.
No, but the as most of you know, Barclay has been building a database of metrics, performances for fitness for years and years. He and I have been working on it in some capacity for a lot of that time as well. And almost every competition that B.Friendly Fitness has live streamed has been supported by the work that Barclay's done on that database, and kind of conversations that we've had and that have evolved over time about what are kind of the best things to pull, and what are the best things to represent athlete performance or predict athlete performance. Barclay has, well, I'll ask Barclay, when did you first have the idea to take it from just this kind of database to a brand that now you've launched?
Mid 2024. And I don't even think there was like a specific moment that I can look to and say like, it's time to, business this all, just rather than keeping it personal and private, essentially. The main trigger for progressing everything is Google's fault. In case anyone didn't know, Brian knows this. In case anyone didn't know, there's a max capacity in Google Sheets of 10 million cells. And so I've become very good at Excel and Google Sheets because I've had to refine and improve my formulas to not waste cell usage, because I've hit that cap, 6 times in the past 4 years, and keep refining it and improving what is actually represented in my Google Sheets database. So I had to move everything out into an actual database that's being pulled and utilized by the website now.
And a lot of times people will just see this thing that we'll talk about that you launched a couple of days ago and not realize the amount of work and conversation and stuff that went into that. But when you told me that was happening, we actually explored like a few different options of working with other people, outsourcing this thing. And you told me, ultimately, I'll teach myself to do it. I want to know how to do that for myself.
That's true. Yeah. I took a web development class when I was in college. I think it was my sophomore year. And it was one of my favorite classes. And I think that the most interesting class, it seems like for many people that their favorite classes in school are the classes that they're the electives that people took. They aren't related to the actual thing that they're interested in pursuing long term. and this was surprisingly one of those courses that was in line with my engineering major that I didn't actually, that I did enjoy a lot. And I never came back to it, web development. But now I had some exposure to it, but I wouldn't say I have like knowledge of it. So I went from mid-August, essentially knowing nothing, with a lot of support from Adam Ambrosius over at Heat One, the Heat One developer, support from him on, just pushing me to get started on different things and assisting me when I had questions, to now knowing that when I look at something that is not in line, literally not in line with another thing on the website, I know exactly where to go and what it looks like and how to fix that.
So if anyone out there is interested in starting their own business, you basically have two options. You could do it like me, and you could find people that are good at the things you're not good at. That's what Patrick and Chad are there for. Or you could do it like Barclay and just teach yourself how to do everything. Either way, the things that are actually being output for people to see are not things that would be unfamiliar to them, because we have shown, for example, what we're looking at the data here is kind of a homepage, and the homepage can be manipulated, obviously. And if you're just looking rank, athlete rating, you've probably seen that before, because they're coming into especially major competitions, and then some of the smaller ones we do, we'll pull what I'm calling now the Apollo ratings, or the Apollo rating scale, and we'll be able to show you against the world or against the field, these are what their rating out of 99 looks like. And so especially if you follow the stuff that we've been doing, you will have seen these things before. But even this times that you haven't seen them, Barclay, I want you to speak to this a little bit. You've been using the metrics and the database to assist in some of the biggest broadcasts and competitions around the world for the last 2 years, really.
Yeah. It's like what I'm presenting is nothing new to me. I've built out formulas and data polls on the back end in Google Sheets where I can just put in an athlete's name and I'll get all the information that I have found to be valuable when providing for a broadcast. And now it's just a matter of transferring it over into the website, into a website format for sure.
And a lot of the times that you're using the data, like where have you seen the data that you have the most kind of public facing or the most influence in storytelling when it comes to like live competition?
Probably Patrick, actually, if you scroll down the table with event wins or placement counts, that's what I have noticed is something that people can latch onto and understand very easily. If you have an event win, that means something to those in the CrossFit community and those outside the CrossFit community. First is first. And that total count, or the number of top 10 finishes, top 5 finishes that any athlete has achieved over their career, their elite individual career, that's something that is understandable to the new and the experienced viewer of CrossFit.
And you and I have probably talked about this somewhere publicly before, but how does an event win populate in the database? Like, what kind of competition do you have to compete in as an athlete to register an event win? If I go to a competition here in Fort Myers in 2 weeks, that's not going to be in the database.
So the database includes all the top 2,000 in the open and quarterfinals, all time, all quarterfinals, all opens, and then all competitions within all competitions within the CrossFit season, as well as for the off season, which is anything outside of the CrossFit Games season. I include all major competitions, the ones that, let's call them household names in a CrossFit household, and then most mid-major competitions, which are competitions where you might know someone's name, where that condition to include it is the athlete is a semifinals level athlete.
Yeah, so just as an example, during the last 4 months or so, on most weekends, I've been sending Barclay competitions. I'll say, hey, there's these 4 competitions happening that I believe there's a few notable names or enough notable names, and that guy's not going to show up.
Don't search mine either. I'm not in there.
And then if let's say that a weekend happens, there's some weekends that I will send you 5 or 6 competitions. What's the process from, maybe some of them are on your radar, some of them not, but once you identify, okay, there's 5 competitions that happen this weekend and I want to get them in the database, what's the process to go from there to there?
Open up the link. Sometimes it's a nice drag with my mouse, copy, paste, and then reformat manually. Sometimes the competitions are actually easier transferred, or the information is disseminated into the database in an easier way. And the easier way is by looking at it and then typing it in on a separate spreadsheet, because it's just the way that the format works on some of these leaderboard websites. The pages that host the leaderboard, they're not conducive to being shared with the agenda that I have, which is putting as much information in one spot as possible, so that we can get an all-encompassing view of how an athlete has done historically.
And I saw this question from Ilya. We'll get to that question in a second. Something that I think is notable is the way that you presented this website on the homepage. Like when you come to the website, the first thing that you probably see is in the middle of the screen, and it says that everything we do begins with a belief in the intense pursuit of truth. What can you talk about why that was such an important thing for you to say, as in like the initial thing that someone might see when they come here?
I believe that, following, I'll get soft here, I guess, following your heart, being true to yourself is something that provides a good compass forward. But that is also, you can take that branch a different way, and it's let's call it objective truth. And that, for me, is tied to mathematics, is tied to numbers, it is tied to honesty in how things are presented. So there is, for example, some of the stuff in the database I don't even put in because it would have to be a guess, and I don't want to put it in if it's a guess. And so that was important to me, is that I only present the stuff that I can put my name to and say, yes, this is true, this aligns with me, and this aligns with what actually happened for this athlete, for this competition, etc.
And we could take an example, because obviously we're going to be using Apollo ratings. You'll actually see a reference to it in some articles that I have pertaining to the, previewing the events, predicting finishes. You'll see some outputs of it on the broadcast. But Wodapalooza is a good example. It's been happening since 2012. We would love to include every iteration of Wodapalooza, and going back X number of years, we can still find the information on websites. Beyond that, we would need to reach out to competition organizers, and if they can send us the results, that's great. But if it's like partial, then that's something you're probably not going to include.
Yep. So I have a separate spreadsheet just for personal use, where I keep a record of all of the different links to the leaderboards that are housed in my database. And I have notes on them, missing workouts, can't complete, or leaderboard is incomplete, missing workout 1, like is just blank. Like I can't include the entire competition's event results just because that single event is missing from the leaderboard. So yes, I do run into those issues very frequently. The two most frustrating are the Dubai leaderboards, going back a certain number of years, do not exist anymore. Maybe someone can do a major in the dark web. What's that, PC?
Ryan might know somebody that has them.
Well, Ryan, no, we've tried.
They're gone, and so that's really unfortunate to me. And then the other one is Lowlands Throwdown before 2019, I think. Leaderboard doesn't exist, but I know that Laura Horvath won like 3 consecutive years, and so like I can't include it. So like her, for example, her historical performance history is incomplete because I don't have those, but I'm not including them without all the information.
And that's like a great example, actually, because one of the cool things, one of the reasons why, let's say I saw, Grand Sapphire Championships this year, and Branislav Lenkovic was there, and Nika Mazeradze, and maybe 2 or 3 other guys that we might recognize. And then there were 20 or 30 guys that we really don't know very much about. Of those 20 or 30 guys, 1 or 2 of them is probably going to be a name that we would recognize 2, 3, 5 years from now. And and the cool thing about it, what I think that Apollo's like future potential is that we will hopefully have the traces of the beginnings of some of the great careers in the sport of fitness. And so I wanted to ask you specifically about that in case this podcast gets out to whoever, and somebody, whether it's Athens Throwdown, the Fittest Experience, Lowlands, Wadapaloozas, Dubai, these competitions especially that have been existing for a decade plus, those old leaderboards could be so cool if we could integrate them here, and then we can start to see more of the backstory to some of the athletes who are most notable now. In some of the cases, because athletes are so young, James Sprigg, Alex Gazan type athletes, it's not that hard to find. But like, where was the first like Joona Koski, for example? I know that he competed at Winter War in Finland in 2015 or 14 or 13 or something like that. One of the earliest ones, and I've seen a video of him on YouTube. You can still go. But I don't know if the leaderboard exists. And so there's always going to be a trace or a beginning for all those athletes. And so, this is kind of like us asking, if you know someone who knows maybe where to find some leaderboards from competitions that have existed for a long time, get in touch with me, get in touch with Barclay, and we would love to put them in there.
Yeah. One competition that I didn't include until this year, so I had to go back. I always verified that I should or should not include a competition's prior iterations. So one of the competitions that I included this year was Desert City Classic. And so I went back, I added in 2023 as well. I went back to 2022 and 2021, and lo and behold, Miss Alex Gazan won both years. And so that was extremely valuable to add, because now we get a more encompassing history of how Alex has done in the CrossFit landscape, just because I have that competition in her history that I wouldn't have even known, because no one's going to talk about a competition that they did 4 years ago unless it's like winning the CrossFit Games.
And you'll see, like, Wadapalooza is an easy example because it's coming up. It's been there for a long time. You'll see in the broadcast in a couple of weeks where we'll have some stats about like legacy athletes or athletes who've been competing there for a long time. This athlete has 7 career individual Wadapalooza experiences, average finish of this, total event wins at Wadapalooza, this number of podiums, championships, whatever. That's where it starts to be really cool to be able to tell those things on a competition historical level. And then, like you're mentioning with Gazan and some others, on a individual level of starting to see the places where they first showed up and were making an impact at the top end of whatever competition it was.
And I'm able to, I'll say, stat vomit like that. Like that's not hard. It's, it's a formula on the back end. Like that's really easy to grab. One of my favorite examples was standing next to Sean Woodland at Wadapalooza last year after Double or Nothing. Is that the first event? And being able to tell him that was Guy's 7th event win in a snatch event, like a snatch max lift. And that's just something that like no one would know, but everyone would appreciate hearing that. Like, that's a really cool stat. I mean, even Guy, I'm sure he would be interested in knowing that was specifically his 7th snatch max lift win in CrossFit.
Well, and I mean, look, that's the type of thing that happens in sport. I'm watching football with my brother a night or two ago, whatever, and something happens and someone goes, that's his first incompletion in 30 attempts. That's his first touchdown in 38 minutes of game time. That's his 17th time that he's led a team to the score in the last 2 minutes. Like, those things are happening in sports all the time in real time. That's what, when I was kind of hoping you would say actually something like that a few minutes ago. Barclay has had this chance at semifinals, at the games, at some Wadapalooza type events, to be there on the back end next to the guys that are speaking and providing them with information in real time. That happens in other sports. And I think that it's because of, like, I think other people have kind of tried, they just haven't maybe found the way in to make actually an input. And I have seen is, I think, every iteration, or at least relevant iteration, of gathering data in the world of fitness or CrossFit, at least in the last 5-7 years, something like that. This is the most comprehensive, easiest to use, and you have found a way to kind of synthesize it to something that's actually usable for someone who doesn't ever have to see the back end.
Yep. That's the plan, is to make it, I find great joy in looking at the stats, looking at the numbers, but it's a specific kind of person that enjoys that. I'm aware of that. And so being able to pull in an extra 1% of people that would come across it, that's huge. If you can get someone that doesn't care about numbers to care for 5 seconds, that's a pretty big achievement to be able to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, for one person like you that loves looking at the numbers and dissecting them, that creates an opportunity for 1,000 people to hear. I mean, it happens all the time. You're watching a game with people having conversations. Someone went to get a drink and someone goes, dude, did you hear what they just said? That's the X number of time that this person did whatever. And then people are like, oh, damn, that's pretty cool. Like, that's the real output of what you're talking about.
But you're seeing it go mainstream. I mean, like I said, I was born a stat nerd. I'm not a big stat nerd anymore as much, because I don't know, I just kind of fallen away from it. But that's how I got into CrossFit, because I grew up reading the back of baseball cards, football cards, stuff like that. That's how I got into it. Then it became me reading Sports Illustrated and just soaking in all that information. And then that led to me into sports information world, where everything's stat driven. When I was inputting stats, whether it be basketball, football, whatever sport. And that led me to working as a statistician, as that person behind the, as a researcher, stats person for ESPN, and just seeing how that looked behind the stage. And, for college football and women's basketball and even Little League World Series, I was doing that for. So it was only a matter of time that analytics and that research and the stats became a part of the sport of CrossFit or functional fitness, whatever you want to call it, because it's inevitable. Because analytics can be put on anything, and what you've done is, like, the way I used to do things is, I still do it now. Brian will tell you, I have everything on note cards. I don't, I didn't have Google Sheets growing up. Everything was on note cards or on those yellow pads, yellow notepads. Everything was kept on that. I would hand them to the graphics people, and they would create the stats. They would create the funny, cool looking thing. Now with Google Sheets and an ability to, organize and keep all that and sort, we didn't have that back then. I mean, yeah, we had like Microsoft Word and Microsoft.
He had his TI-89.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had that. But I think it's just great, because now you're seeing it mainstream. I'm a big Pat McAfee fan, and people watch Pat McAfee and they just think he's sitting there just talking about, I still say old school. Yeah, I mean, my whole desk is full with just like note cards. But Pat McAfee, people ask him, they say that guy's just a cool dude. But if you watch his podcast or listen to it, it's so analytical and stat driven. I mean, and they're not done by the people you typically would think that they would, but that's just how people are. Like Brian says, like, someone leaves and you hear just what happened, and it's a cool thing. And it's only a matter of time. And what you've done is you've created something just amazing. And now you're sharing it out there. I remember I had a conversation with Chase this, and I don't know if you've had the same conversation, but I think Chase actually owns like the URL for something that says like, it's like CrossFitStats.com or something like that. Like, he bought the URL that was something like that. I have to check it out. I mean, Chase would know it, but he had this idea, but he just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. And then, I think earlier part, that's what me and Brian were doing for the morning chalk-up. We brought some analysis to it, but not at this level. I would only go back to the game season. You've done something amazing. And
or if we did want to go to that level, it would take a lot of research and time to do it. Yeah. When I used to, every competition that I used to work at during the sanctionals era, I would manually create my own spreadsheets. In the kind of middle interim time, maybe 2020 time period, I think I started work. I can't remember, honestly, if I heard from you or John or Tyler first, but we started finding some, and then eventually Mike as well. We started finding ways to make it more efficient. And that the efficiency has just improved so much in the last 4 years to where now it's very easy. I say, here's the roster, and you do a pull, and we can get what we want depending on how much level of detail we want. But there were 2 questions that had come in earlier that I think would be really helpful and especially good to contextualize. If Patrick, if we can pull up the just the homepage with the top of the men's rankings again. Sure. So just Barclay, in case anyone's not familiar with it, when they see the output of an athlete's rating, what is that currently based on?
PC, go to the ratings tab in the upper right corner instead. So I have outlined the explanation for how the ratings work on the page. And I guess I'll just read it here. Athletes earn points from all individual competitions over a 2-year period that qualify for the Apollo database. These points are based on their finishing position and the strength of field at each competition. The points are then converted into a rating on a scale of 0 to 99, with the strongest athlete receiving a rating of 99.
So does that mean there will always be someone rated 99?
Yes, but not limited to one athlete being rated 99. There,
as we would see on the women's side, but we'll go to the women's side in a second. Let's stay here. First of all, just looking at this screen here, because I think that the first 5 or 6 names on the leaderboard really speak also to the truth element of this. And this is something that you and I discussed a week or 2 ago. And we see Jeff Adler there not coming in as a 99, despite pretty much winning every competition that he's done in the last 2 years, barring one, which was the CrossFit Games last summer that he withdrew from. I have sometimes given you some pushback, like, don't count that against him. And you said, then I would be just doing a disservice to truth.
Yep. I can't change. I can't guess. I can't estimate. I can't do that. The results are the results, regardless of the circumstances surrounding them, which is devastating. That is separate from Jeff Adler's result at the CrossFit Games. And Jeff Adler made a decision to withdraw. I can only reward him as much as he did at the competition.
That's like true. That is what I'm trying to highlight here is that the output of the rating is a computer. So it's not taking emotion or injury or circumstance into account. If an athlete shows up at a competition that's in the database and shows up on the leaderboard with a placement, that placement and all the results that led into that placement are entered into the database, and the output is the output.
When I first revealed, I still remember when I first revealed these, I came on B.Friendly, a year ago, maybe it's a little bit longer than that now. When I first put these ratings out for the first time, when they weren't Apollo ratings, they were just strength of field ratings. I made the comment that no one can be mad at me for what the output is. They can be mad at me for how it's calculated, but they can't be mad at me for the actual results, because the results are exclusively based off of the athlete's performance. If you're mad at how low an athlete is ranked, don't yell at me. Yell at the athlete to do better in competition, and they will then rank higher.
Barclay, I have a question regarding that. Like, in the case of Adler, like he did one workout. What if you have, I didn't look it up, but what about someone like Victor Hoffer who qualified for the games but never started the games?
No participation in an event means that they're not included. I think it's in one of the FAQs at the bottom of the page is. Okay.
So if they're there at the competition, they elect not to compete, then that they get that counts against them.
No. It does not count against them. They have to compete a minimum of one event.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So anyone there are scenarios where, I mean, think about just all the off-season competitions. People say that they're going to a competition and then they get sick or they get injured or their flight, they can't make it in time. Well, I'm not going to count that against them because they didn't even elect to. They elected to contribute, or participate, but they didn't actually end up participating at all.
Well, how does that affect someone like Jorge at the Asia Fitness Championships, who missed his flight, missed the first 2 events, still did the competition, and finished, I think, 4th or whatever. I mean, is the results the results, or do you take into account that, that he missed his flight, or I don't know. I guess
the results are the results. That the only exception to the rule is that Victor Hoffer not competing. I don't include it. He didn't contribute to the strength of the competition in the end. He didn't contribute to his own ratings because he did not compete at all.
Well, let's say
that would hurt his rating because he did not compete technically.
Let's so let's stay there, because if you scroll back to the top there with the description, Patrick, you talked about the two factors, finishing position relative to strength of field. And a while ago, I mentioned that Ilya had put in a comment here, is winning an event at Rogue equal to winning an event at the Madrid Championship? And what I would say is, for event wins, tabulation over time in a win column, yes, a win is a win is a win. But your finishing position at Rogue third compared to your finish position at Madrid third would not rate the same as it attributes to your overall rating. That seems fairly straightforward. I think someone else in the comments had kind of talked about it, but can you talk about the process again? I think this was like a year-long process between you and I a few years ago, but the process, because I think we often say like, it's like a chicken or an egg. How do you assess the strength of the field? And at some point you have to have a starting point somewhere. So how did you eventually get to a point where you felt confident assessing the strength of the field before the competition happened?
So the strength of field is based off of the strength of the individual athletes leading into the competition, period. If Jeff Adler does not compete in a competition, then his points will not dictate the strength of field or contribute to the strength of field at that competition. After that strength of field is determined, that determines the number of points that are available for the athletes at that competition to receive at the end of the weekend. And they add those points into their total, and then they compete at another competition, and that point total determines the strength of field. So it keeps going around in a circle. It is chicken or the egg. And you're correct. It does have to start somewhere. You have to put something into the system. So I go all the way back to the 2007 CrossFit Games, and I arbitrarily set it to a strength of 1. And then for the games in 08, I set it to 2 because it would make sense that it's stronger than 07. Same thing for 2009, it's a 3. 2010, it's a 4. And then the Open in 2011, the very first Open, is set to a strength of 1 because I include 2,000 athletes. So the strength of the average of those top 2,000 is much lower than the strength of I forget how many competed in the 2010 games. After those 5 initial conditions, I just group it together and call that the initial condition to the system. The whole thing is self-sufficient and it runs on its own. Athletes earn points at those competitions, leads into their next competition, and the whole thing grows and grows from there.
And look, we did a ton of trial and errors. We found specific athletes and specific competitions that kind of proved faults as we went along. And in the last, 18 months to 24 months, I feel like it's just kind of, like you said, running itself.
Yep. I don't really test or validate the results anymore, I guess I would say, because I trust the results to be more accurate than I would be able to subjectively determine. But
you're also not resistant to me questioning the results.
No, anyone can question. I mean, I'm still having, this is, I'm not a fan of how Rogue describes their system, saying that it's in beta mode, but it's true. This is it's always in the works. I'm always open to feedback, and we're talking about this now. I might change it tomorrow, and not drastically, but I might change it to not include a single competition. Well, that's going to affect everything because it's a
we actually did this in the last 3 weeks. I mean, you gave me an initial reading for the athletes at Wodapalooza, and then you added 30 competitions, and then you gave me another reading.
Yep. And it shifted a little bit. I might, as I continually add competitions, the results are going to change. I might get questions from people in the comment section and to say, oh, I should add that in the FAQ or look into tweaking that in the system. This is by no means set in stone. But it is certainly an accurate representation of the performance of CrossFit athletes in the world today.
and this comment from CJ, I think it should say crucial there. So he says, so crucial to have an independent data system, not affiliated with a particular competition or season. And this is obviously in the last couple of years, we've seen the emergence of the worldwide ranking system that CrossFit has. We've seen the kind of revelation, I guess, of the rogue ranking system that I think they've been using but didn't really advertise. I think that I'm curious to know if the WFP has some sort of rate. I think that Will did talk about they have like their own rating system that's a hybrid of a couple different things. And we've seen some different iterations of rating systems popping up that do not seem to be what CJ is referencing here, which is independent of any bias. And the bias would be I'm only selecting to use the game season, X competitions that I predetermine. When you see those things out there, and I actually want to ask you in conjunction with this comment from Ironically Fit about the trajectory of the system. Is someone going to be using it? We are using it. We have been using it for years. And you will see, you haven't seen all the expressions of it with the, certainly not with the name Apollo, which is new. A lot of times it's being used but not referenced. I think it will be used and referenced more often when it's used going forward. But if there is an entity out there that is interested in using this database because it is absent of the bias, what would that person or competition need to do?
You contact me. Contact the Apollo. I'm on Instagram now in 2 different places. I have 2 different emails now. I have 2 of everything now, so it doubled the opportunities to contact me. It might just be as simple as, you don't even need to contact me, and you just look at these ratings and you pull your athletes and or look at the ratings of athletes that you're interested in, and you can get some sort of explanation or stats based off of that reading. Some of the values that I see in this system specifically are local comps referencing this or reaching out to me, because I could do a mass pull at one point and saying, we would like to put the condition on our local comp that anyone with a rating is not allowed to compete. Which is not hard. Many people think, well, wouldn't everyone have a rating? No, because I cap it at 2,000, top 2,000 in the open and the quarterfinals. I think it only goes out to like the top 5,000 or 4,500, something like that at any given point. So any athlete that does not have a rating can compete in our competition, or mid-major competitions, anyone with a rating of 90 plus, or anyone that's in the top 20 is not allowed to compete. Or you can make it really easy and say only the top 20 athletes are allowed. We're going to take the top 10. So we'll go from first, or we'll go with the first to 10. We'll invite them. Anyone that declines will go to the next person on the list. Those are just some opportunities to utilize it, and I'm more than willing to have those conversations.
I saw this comment from Lynn pop up. Input may include the graphs of athlete and ranking over time by year that you had last time. It would be a good visual aid. We did an article like this. When did we do that article, Barclay?
I don't know. Time is a social construct.
9 months ago or something. We put an article out from both men and women that basically were like the top men and women since I think 2016 or 17, somewhere around there, and tracking them at 4 data points per year, and you could see the various ebbs and flows. And we chose people like Ricky Garrard, who had this high, disappeared off the map, came back. We chose people like Matt Fraser, who got to the top, stayed, and then slowly fell off as he retired. We saw people like Vellner, who just stayed there forever. And yeah, absolutely. I do use it for prediction shows. Actually, the article that I'm writing right now, I think, Barclay, for the first time ever, you pulled data, used ratings for teams.
Yes, I did a larger poll for the team athletes this time compared to any other broadcast support statistics that I've done in the past. And I did include them for the teams, and I think that they'll be utilized. You can say better than me. I think they'll be utilized.
Yes. The article that I'm writing today, I actually reference them in it, and I show some of the strengths of fields, like the composite for the teams. But then I mentioned that the database as a whole, this is the article I was talking about. Great job, Patrick. Yeah, so there's a graph over time. Here are some of the athletes you can see, and then those are the checkpoints along the way. Did you see the date of when this was published?
Yes.
I missed that.
April 16th.
April. I said 9 months ago. Not far off. And then, but I mentioned that, like in the case of the teams at Wodapalooza, for example, there are a couple of teams of Norwegian athletes who always compete on teams and have very little individual data. Those athletes, I would project them, those teams, I would project to do much better than the Apollo rating system would reward them for, because they don't have a lot of their most relevant performances have come in team competitions.
Yep. And that would be a question that someone is justified to ask me as well. Where's the team competitions? Just as they're justified in asking where the teams masters adaptive, where is that in the database? Team specifically is not included because it's how the heck do you compare apples to oranges in that scenario? How do you compare what is the contribution of a single teammate to the end results of an event, of the overall leaderboard? How does that compare to an individual finish at an individual competition? I haven't been able to determine that. So where I'm able to put my stamp of approval, personal stamp of approval and faith in the data is just by keeping it exclusive to elite individual competitions.
And it's something that we've discussed over the years. The other thing, because masters, teenagers, you could apply it to that. Those are individual competitions. But I think it was important for you and we talked about it, to establish something that worked and then apply it to a different division.
Yep. And it'll take a long time to do. So there's no point in doing double work by not working out the kinks in the first system and then duplicating it for the second system and having to do that work twice. So sticking to one, I have aspirations to add masters, of adding teams, of adding adaptive to the database. It's just a lot of time, and it's just me that's adding it. So, some grace in that
Get an intern, dude. Get an intern.
Yeah, exactly.
he was the intern. Don't you remember who made that GIF that one time? It was like the B.Friendly fitness database with the file cabinets, and they superimposed you and Halpin.
It was Wad Zombie.
Was it Wad Zombie or was it Peter? One of those two. They were the two that would make something like that. Yeah, that was a good one.
Ironically, Phil, I'll give you just a quick example because it's a very easy one. Jason Hopper, Patrick Fellner, Jeff Adler are competing on a team at Wodapalooza. Their ratings are 98, 98, 97. And so you just take the average and it's 97.3. And that would be their team's composite rating. Correct, Barclay?
Correct.
See how good at math I am?
Yep.
One thing that Fikowski on this, but he's retired. How does one get off the list?
Yep. Ironically, Fit answered their own question. Yes, you wait 2 years and then you drop off. So because of the 2-year look back, at this current point in time, with the 2-year look back, Brent Fikowski's third place finish at the games, third place finish at Rogue, combined with all competition in the rest of the 2 years, has put him at the top of the rating system. So I like to say Fikowski literally went out on top.
And probably not the first one to do it.
No, that is correct. He is not the first one to go out on top. But I think that's interesting is people talk about who did the best this year. Well, I would say it's Brent, and people can argue other things and they're justified in arguing that way. But if I'm going based off of numbers and granted a calculation that I performed on the data, I would say that Brent's the best. Right? Brent was the best performer this year.
And therefore the fittest on earth?
I don't know. Can't say.
Good. That's the right answer. Something I wanted to do for sure before we, I don't know if this needs to go too much longer, but I definitely wanted you to talk about the format of the website and the usability of it. So if somebody goes there and wants to, walk Patrick through how you would go about using the website, basically.
Any time that an athlete's name appears, you can click on it and it will take you to their athlete profile, I'll call it. So Patrick just picked on Dallin Pepper, and it will show just some basic information that I pull primarily from their CrossFit Games profile. but also the counts of the number of competitions they've competed in. Again, with an asterisk, it's elite, individual only. The number of events that they've competed in. Some people use the word workout or test. Gives a history and reverse order. So their oldest competition is the last one in that table, all the way to their first. And then below that is their total finishes by place, and the total, like top blank finishes, is that right?
So we could say he's had 70 top 10 finishes.
Correct.
And he could say he's had 24 top 3s and 7 event wins. And then if you click, can you click on the event wins to see what they are?
Not yet.
Is that something you envision adding?
Oh, Brian, my to-do list is so long. You have no idea. So
can you make the worst finishes a priority? Because that's all I care about. I want to see what their worst finish is.
Yeah. I could toggle adding things like sorting to best finishes or worst finishes. You
have to pay for the worst finishes.
Just the worst finishes.
That's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it.
One thing that I would like to add is, and Brian has seen this firsthand, is because of the Apollo rating system and because of my strength of field calculation, I'm able to order how good an athlete's finish is relative to their other finishes based off of the number of points that they earned at that competition. You can ask her how many more days. Yes, that is correct. Well, I'm working on getting out of it, Lynn. So don't be surprised if I reach out at some point. So Patrick, all competition names are also clickable. I think you might have recognized that as well. So they could take you to the 2024 CrossFit Games, and it will populate with the leaderboard and the number of wins and top 10s that an individual athlete had at that competition. A lot of complaints that I foresee receiving are speed of the website, load time, essentially. I'm essentially, there you go, on left side of the screen, Apollo ratings hasn't even appeared yet. The trending athletes on the right side of the screen hasn't appeared yet. Some of it's pretty slow, but I think it's partially because of the size of the database. So Patrick, do not click on this. The event finishes tab, that will show, if you were to click on it, that will show after about 12 seconds, the number of first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th place finishes, the cumulative count for all athletes that have a top 10 finish in my database. It is 53,000 data points that of athletes with top 10 finishes in my database. It takes a little time to load. So one of the things that I'm improving upon daily is efficiency of load time in the database. So the data's there. You just have to be a little bit patient right now. So what I did was I essentially made the minimum viable product to put this page out, because I wanted this to not be something that people have heard for the first time at Wodapalooza. I wanted them to at least have some sort of exposure prior to Wodapalooza because of the utilization by name at Wodapalooza this year of Apollo.
So I motivated you to get it out.
A little bit, yeah, yep.
Or at least to get it out. At least to get it out faster.
Credit for something. Yeah.
Everyone.
No, I did. Like 3-4 weeks ago, I said, "Hey, Barclay, I want this. I want this by Wodapalooza." And we have added a new feature to the way that we pull data for Wodapalooza that we've been talking about for a while, and now you've made it happen.
Which one? The
last 5 finishes.
Oh, love that one. Wait till I get the movement one figured out.
Yeah, I'm constantly. The reason his to-do list never gets shorter is because I'm constantly.
Brian has my number. That's why.
Well, now that I know what the site looks like and what it's about, I mean, I'm gonna hit you up with a bunch of things too.
I'm all ears. This is I'm hosting it, but I think of this as it's kind of like a community collaboration.
It really is. I mean, I think anything you do, especially in our sport, because it's ran by it's served by the community. So everything. I mean that's the kind of the premise for B.Friendly Fitness to begin with, was we want to serve the community. I mean, one of the first things Brian says, like, I don't want to monetize everything, because everything we're doing, or at least put things behind a paywall, is because I want people to see that stuff, and they shouldn't have to pay for it. because the community is what drives it. You know,
Yep.
But if you want to search for the worst place finishes of the athletes, that's vindictive, and you do need to pay for that.
Yeah, probably. Damn it. No, because I definitely like, we have that photo database, and I think something that would help your website out a lot better would just be like incorporating pictures or whatever into with the athlete profile. So,
Yep.
Totally
agree.
So you LLC, right?
I am LLC. I am Apollo Performance Analytics LLC, casually known as Apollo because it's a lot shorter.
So LLC, that means you're.
I'm safe from everything.
Well, it's safe from everything, but obviously, whenever someone starts something, a business or an LLC or whatever, there has to be there's a little bit of a goal. I wouldn't say the end goal is to make some money off of doing this. How do you see this being a revenue generating thing for you? Because obviously you're putting a lot of work in, and it's a shame that you're not getting compensated for it. So, what do you see in terms of what are the plans for this to be a little bit more profitable for you?
The official answer is I don't know. I'm doing this because I have a lot of fun doing this, and I think that other people enjoy seeing this stuff. The number of times I went to.
Let me answer for you then.
Okay. Brian knows I'm not the best at this stuff.
No, well, but since the first time that I've asked for something from you, I've always paid you for it.
That's true.
And I pay you more per thing that I ask you for than the time that it takes you to do it now.
True, because of all the time that it took me to get to that point.
And that's what I think this is a positive comment from CJ. You guys are really threatening this sport with legitimacy. And I do want to get your perspective on that, Barclay, about how having something like this does legitimize the athlete performances historically and in real time. But it's one of these things like it's taken years to build this. And the concept of it is something that a lot of people can think about. You don't need to recreate it a million times. Like you're talking about this community element, but at some point it needs to live somewhere. There needs to be a meaningful database that's historical for a sport. I saw this, it's like such a random thing. It's not maybe related to this, but I saw something pop up on Instagram the other day. The last time that each NFL franchise sold itself.
Oh yeah.
It dates back to 1920. The Bears sold themselves for $100. Green Bay had an NA next to their name, dating all the way up to a $5 million sale of whatever the Washington team is called these days. And but that's historical data. That is housed somewhere. There's a database that actually exists that is the gatekeeper of that information. And for the CrossFit Games, that kind of exists, but it does not. Yes and no. It's. I'm not going to go into the details of it here, but it does exist in reality, or it does exist in theory, but in reality, it's a little bit messy. But the CrossFit Games database is only that. It's only related to the CrossFit Games, and the sport has evolved well beyond the games. Mm-hmm. And I'm not speaking for Barclay or Patrick here. Personally, I think it's one of the shortcomings of the CrossFit Games is that they have failed to keep up with the evolution of the sport beyond their season. They've chosen to stay in that narrow lane. That's their decision. I think it comes at the expense of actually legitimizing the totality of what competitive fitness is now. And it's also one of the reasons why it's created all these kind of fractures where you're not really sure where to look for what. And this season is going to be the most confusing, or this year is going to be the most confusing of expression of that we've ever seen. But I think, Barclay, based on what I read on your homepage of that pursuit of truth, that this thing that CJ is talking about in terms of legitimizing a sport has to be something that's at the forefront of your mind when you've been building this for 4 or 5 years.
Not particularly. I hope that it does, but I didn't go into it and say, like, my initial thought when I initially built this database, when I was sitting at the island of in a kitchen of, I forget whose house it was in 2020, I opened up my laptop and said, I got nothing else to do. I wonder what sort of analytics could be done on the CrossFit Games. And I started copying data from the CrossFit Games website and opened it or put it into a Google Sheet. That is exactly right. That's how it started. And so, hey, calm down.
He believes in truth, Melanie. He can only speak the truth.
Yeah. I don't really have this like hidden agenda with anything. I do it because I like it. If something that I does contributes to the legitimacy of the sport, awesome. That's not my mission though. Like I'm not seeking out to make $1 million. I'm not going out to become the president of the International CrossFit Associate. Like that's not. I'm having fun with understanding these athletes from a performance perspective.
This is directed at me, and I will take it. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, and then if Patrick wants to add some stuff, of course, that's fine. Was when it comes to, because this is something that's particularly interesting to me, and we've seen, I think, definitely some expressions of this through the variety of different ways that you can interact with Heat One app and that platform is. You take it. I think Wadapalooza is a great example of this. There's 40 men in the field. There's 45 women in the field. And, quite frankly, bigger picture comments, a lot of people aren't going to be interested in the bottom half of the field or maybe even the bottom third of the field for a majority of it. But we know that athletes in that range can have significant impact on the top quarter of the field in maybe not the whole competition, but in an event here or there, a combination of movements, etc. How specific can you be when analyzing an athlete's potential for, most of the workouts for Wadapalooza are coming out, for example. So let's just fast forward and say this athlete placed 30th in the men's field, but let's just call that person Enrico Zanoni because that name just popped into my mind. But could we say, I'm curious if there's a specific event at Wadapalooza this year that I should be on the lookout for Enrico Zanoni to do well. Can you dial in on that?
Yes. So I break down all the events that an athlete participates into, I'll call it the bare bones of the event. The movements that exist in it, the modalities of those movements, the structure of the event, whether it's rounds for time, whether it's an AMRAP, whether it's a max lift, breaking down all these things into their basic pieces. And I can break out historical data. And then once I have the bare bones, I can build it back up to recreate any sort of event for an athlete so that I can predict how an athlete would do in any given event. I have about a 70% correlation to the overall leaderboard to my expected results. And in epidemiology, the study of populations, the accepted result is 0.65, I think, is correlation.
So probably when I said last week that I have an accuracy of 75%, I was over exaggerating.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. If you can do better than a computer can do, then yeah, you can be better than what I have. But that's so. To your question specifically,
can you use specifically the computer's data to predict the outcomes of Wadapalooza?
Yes.
Okay, I already put out my
accuracy. No.
Let's test it. But we've tested it before, but let's test it for the public. Apollo versus me for the men's individual field at Wadapalooza.
You know that someone else messaged me and they want to get in on that, and I'll do that if.
Do I know the person?
Yes.
Okay, you don't have to say their name here, but fine. Let's put it in a message thread and let's see where it pops out. And then can you take each of our individual scores, Apollo, me, and Person X, and output the accuracy level?
Yep.
Excellent. Let's post that if it's not too embarrassing next couple of weeks from now.
Okay, that sounds good. I can do that. And I can do it on an event base. I have the ability to forecast a shakeup. So things that you don't predict to happen based off of historical performance, because the data doesn't exist, are very hard to include because the data doesn't exist surrounding them. If it was predictable, then it wouldn't be a shakeup, essentially, is the point.
But potentially could be, okay, we're let's say it's Thursday night, Wadapalooza, or this is a great example, Thursday night, Rogue Invitational, first night after Rogue Invitational, the first ever one, Pat Vellner's ahead of Matt Fraser. You could potentially have looked forward to the second day's events and also looked back at the first day's events and used the model to say, well, it's not that surprising, actually, that Pat Vellner's in the lead relative to Matt Fraser after these 3 events, because Lynn remembers this from this year, but it could have been true back then. There were burpees and deadlifts and sandbag carries, and it just so happened that day 1 of the 2019 Rogue Invitational was 6 of Pat Vellner's 8 best movements. But tomorrow there's deficit handstand push-ups and there's a max snatching event, and therefore I think it's projected that Fraser and potentially this one other athlete could pass him too.
Yep, all possible.
That's cool. Patrick, take it over.
I don't know what to say, man.
Okay, strike 2 for me.
Just like me.
Brian brought up that whole thing about, the value, putting the value in your work. I remember when we had that conversation about, getting paid what your worth is and not putting stuff out there for free. So it really makes me happy to see that you're doing that, and that this is a platform to show your real talents. You've kind of been one of those guys that everyone references and talks about, but but people are like, what exactly does he do? And now you get to show off your work and show what you really do, and show. I'm just really proud of you. I think it's really cool what you're doing, and knowing you, it's only going to get better. You're a perfectionist, and that's one of those things that you're just gonna. I mean, I just can't wait to see where this website goes and what you do with Apollo. I think it's a very fitting name, Apollo. And but yeah, can you talk about why you picked the name Apollo?
I have always had an affinity for is affinity the right word? For Greek mythology. I was a swimmer, so obviously Poseidon was my favorite. But I didn't want to just pick Poseidon because I like Poseidon, and so I did some research into athletes into gods and what they're known for or what they're associated with. And a couple were tied to mathematics, a couple were tied to stats, precision, etc. But I settled on Apollo because of the Oracle of Delphi, and the truth that the Oracle has to provide to the person that asked the Oracle, and the association that Apollo has with Oracle. So just wait for those probabilities to go live on my site. Who knows when that will get built out? At some point in this CrossFit Games season, those probabilities will be live, and I will likely just call it the Oracle rather than just probabilities, because it's the teller of truth.
Well,
thank you.
If you're not,
this is going to Apollo.
There you go. Look, making money already.
Thank you, SPM.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's really cool. I just can't wait to see it grow, and it's amazing. If you haven't already, follow on Instagram Apollo Perform. It's right there in his byline. It's also in the chat. It's also in the description, and also save the website. What do you call that? You bookmark it, right?
Yep.
Bookmark the website. Let's. You know what? We should try to make that thing crash.
Please don't. I'm already embarrassed enough about the load time.
No.
Well, you may want to forecast ahead of time for 2 weeks from now, because we're putting your logo on the broadcast in Miami.
No, exactly. I'm aware of that. Yeah. I love. That's not as of concern for me. It's what else can I get done now that the site's out to be more prepared and provide more insights to those that view the site by Wodapalooza, at Wodapalooza, and moving forward from then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just really cool.
I just echo what Patrick said. The work that you've put in over a long period of time to make something like this possible, I think that it has the potential to do some really cool things on the storytelling side to help contextualize the origins of athletes that we end up seeing at the highest level, and give us a chance to look back. Because, some of the athletes, sometimes they pop on the scene and we just see them right away. But a lot of these athletes are coming from different parts of the world that don't have the same exposure or like little means or whatever. And hopefully we can just continue to build this out. So I want to emphasize again, if anyone, well, first of all, if you've made it this far, an hour plus listening to us nerd out about Apollo, that's really cool. I think the girls have lost it. They're talking about cookies and I don't even know what's going on over here. But yeah, if you know somebody who might have some data that could help to facilitate this, if you're aware of, I mean, look, we as a group try to do a really good job of keeping a pulse on relevant competitions that are happening around the world, but there's constantly ones popping up or re-emerging that has been dormant for a few years. So whether it's through Barclay or me or Patrick, whoever you know in the easiest way, we want to continue to build this thing so the storytelling can continue to improve.
Yeah, definitely. You should talk to Fraser and ask him about some of those. He always talks about those.
This is the guy. This is the guy who owns Comp Corner, by the way.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to say it, but since he put it out.
Okay.
But he always talked about those. When he first started, he was just going to like these small competitions and winning them. You should ask him if he remembers any of those names and start entering in there.
Just some random local comp that's in there just because Fraser won.
Vermont Maple Syrup Throwdown, put that in first place. Won 7 events, or something like that. What was the one? What was the one they did in Boston?
Is it the East Coast Championship?
Yeah, East Coast Championship. Are there results for that?
I haven't found them. That doesn't mean that they don't exist.
That would be a great one to find. If anyone knows someone who has the East Coast Championship leaderboards, that would be cool.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some of the older competitions that were out there that kind of went away. But
I wonder if O'Keefe would know how to find them, or
Ben either O'Keefe or Ben. Yeah, maybe Bergeron does. But yeah, but I almost tempted to call Annie or Annie Thorsdottir, see if she has any of the final results from Dubai or something, or I don't know.
We have the results from us every year in Dubai. We just don't have the workouts, etc.
Yeah.
Wow, they used WOD time back then, I believe. There you go.
I've befriended so many of the sites, not the people that own the sites, but the sites themselves, that they all blend together. That might have been one that the site doesn't actually exist anymore. One of them, the site doesn't exist anymore. And so I had the link to the competition, but
broken link.
It's gone.
It's basically it's like everything from the morning chalk up before Barbend.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Where you go? Anyway, we could go down rabbit holes forever like this. I think this was a pretty productive hour. I think we covered a lot of the spectrum of what Apollo offers. I do believe that there's people out there that can help to contribute to this. If you are listening to this and you're one of those people, definitely reach out. If you know someone, reach out. Be on the lookout for Apollo to be involved with the broadcast at Wodapalooza. Barclay will be down here working with our team to try, goal as always is to tell the best stories possible on behalf of the competition, the athletes, for you guys at home. And Barclay is without a doubt a huge part of that in our community right now. So thanks for taking the time in the middle of a workday, Barclay. PC, I know it's late over there and you're swamped, man. This was a last minute thing that we put together, but I felt like it was something that was worthwhile to do. Hopefully you guys do also. Thank you to HGR CBD, as always, for supporting us. It means the world to Patrick and Chad and I. And Patrick, I'll let you get us out of here.
Hey, Barclay, be friendly, our friends.